Hello everyone, this is Matt with the Grappling Podcast, and in today's episode, Levi and I have our first repeat guest. We have Jordan Laster back on the pod. So, for those who don't know Jordan is a jiu-jitsu practitioner who has been working to raise the skill and ability of wrestling in jiu-jitsu as a whole. So why should you listen to what Jordan has to say? Well, Jordan actually wrestled at Princeton University where he was top 12 in the nation in his weight class. Jordan is a phenomenal wrestler, he's a really great teacher, and he brings a great perspective when it comes to combining wrestling or stand-up game in general to your jiu-jitsu game in a digestible and actionable way that's also tailored to the skill sets and the goals of that training room. So if you're interested in learning how to develop a solid stand-up game for jiu-jitsu, this episode is for you. It's full of strategy and tactics. So if you enjoy this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. It helps the podcast. And definitely make sure to check out Jordan's website and products. Now, without further delay, here's our discussion with Jordan Laster. All right. So, hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Grappling Podcast. Today we have a really cool episode. We have Jordan, friend of the show, back on for part two. This is our first part tour, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, part two. Pretty cool. So to kind of give a quick recap on part one, we actually kind of went through your like wrestling journey or grappling and athletic journey. We didn't get all the way through it, and today we're probably not going to get through the other half of it either.
Cool. I could do the abridged version.
Yeah. But really, so I guess for those who are listening who are newer to the podcast, and they should definitely go and check out your earlier episode. But could you give maybe
That's on a Midwest trend.
What?
Right there. Episode.
I
heard it. I heard it too.
So anyway, could you give yourself here an update, or give the listeners a good update on? Could you actually just share a little bit about yourself? And we're going to be talking about wrestling today, but also maybe kind of share why what you have to say about wrestling comes from a good background.
Yeah. So I started wrestling in 6th grade. And I wrestled all the way through college. I wrestled at Princeton University, and they have a D1 program, so I wrestled there. I was a 3-time national qualifier, and then for those who know wrestling, I lost in the blood round my sophomore year, which means I lost the match to become an All-American. So I was very close to becoming top 8 in the country. So I always say I was a good wrestler, but I was not great. So that's kind of my distinction there. But yeah, now I coach here at Theory Jiu-Jitsu Studio in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Nice.
Is that top 8 like for your weight division? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy.
So you're like 9, top 16.
Top 10. Top 10, right? Could you say top 10?
So it's the round of 12.
Okay.
So it's like, I guess technically top 12.
Yeah.
But
that's legit. I think you can say you're a great wrestler at top 12.
It's relative, you know?
Yeah. I was going to say, seriously though, because if you had a room, of 1,000 people, the fact that you're in the top 12%, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I did get to wrestle like a lot of the best guys in the country. I've wrestled Olympians. So right now there's a guy who was in my weight class, Zane Rutherford, who was a 3-time national champ. I think he was 3-timer. And he took 3rd the year he didn't win it. He's an Olympian now, so I've gone against the best guys, and there are levels to this sport.
I was going to say, so when you're watching some of these guys, you just kind of be like, that guy got that far, or is it actually like, oh no, that makes perfect sense. That dude was insane.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. I've lost to a bunch of guys who've made world teams, won worlds, won the Olympics, and they definitely earned it. Those guys are next level, and I truly don't know what more I could have done to catch them, because I felt like I did everything I could, but I'm still always in the pursuit of improving my game.
Yeah, for sure. And you've also been doing some tweaking to make it more applicable to jiu-jitsu, right?
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. So that's got to be wild because so Jordan, when you play wrestle with me, I'm just always just like, I'll never beat this guy.
We were just joking about that because I always say because jiu-jitsu doesn't have a verb, you can't jiu-jitsu.
I was just more so meaning that Jordan's being nice.
Oh, being nice. Oh, okay. I say that because you could play jiu-jitsu or play wrestling, and Jordan's like, we don't play wrestling. we wrestle.
I was more so just meaning the fact that Jordan's not creaming me against the floor, 100%.
I know
right away.
He's been
You're letting me work a little bit, But it's crazy. It's like when we go together, I'm just like, Jordan, you were so good at this, so good. And then you even tell me that when you were only wrestling, obviously you were sharper at that. like it's hard to believe that there's people that could be better at wrestling. Like that's insane to me. Like I can't even like compute it. It's like when they tell you how big the sun is and you're like, yeah, it's big.
Yeah. On that note too, I always thought I was better than everybody because I think you kind of have to have that belief. And if I lost a lot of times, it's like, I'm better than that guy. I shouldn't have lost. But when I would lose to guys who were like Zane Rutherford, who's now an Olympian, and starts competing in like a week or two, I could tell that, like, I thought I was really good, but I was like, I am not crap compared to this guy.
Oh, man, that is so crazy. You know, like without going too far down, it's just levels of the game, right? Like it's really interesting. Everybody's ran into that, even just who are hobbyist jiu-jitsu players, right? Where they're like, oh, I'm pretty okay. And then they go against someone, they're just like, oh my God, I don't even know jiu-jitsu. Like Ryan Hall even talked about that. Ryan Hall, who's like incredible at jiu-jitsu, says there was times he trained with guys who were like world champs who he would like literally go home and be like, why am I even doing this? Like these guys are like, I don't even know how to catch up, you know, like, and so like, that's just unbelievable to me. Like, is it just like technique, speed, or like?
I would say though, I had that feeling like, wow, there are levels to this, but it motivated me. So I always wished I could go against them again.
Oh yeah.
Just to like, see what adjustments I can make and strategize a little bit better. Because against those guys, if you know they're like levels above you, you do need to come in with a bit more of a game plan. Whereas most of the time I competed best without one.
Okay.
Just because, I don't like the mental overhead of that. Okay. And I don't like to think when I wrestle because that's when I start getting tired.
Okay.
But with those sorts of guys, you do have to strategize a bit more. So I would love to go back up against Zane Rutherford. Or,
Zane, if you're listening.
Or,
That's cool.
Logan Stieber, or like a bunch of guys who gave me some butt whoopings in college.
That's cool. That's a great mindset too. That's very like growth mindset. Like I like that. I like that a lot.
Do you know a number of them that have continued grappling or even switched over to jiu-jitsu or added jiu-jitsu into their regular training, I guess? Or continued?
I bet you Zane Rutherford has done some jiu-jitsu because he's a Penn State guy, and Jason Nolf has been doing jiu-jitsu. Sure. I think they have Isaac Michel. I think that's how you say his name. He's in their room right now helping Nolf get ready for CJI.
Oh, okay.
I've seen RBY, Roman Bravo Young. He had a jiu-jitsu match. I forgot who it was against. But a lot of the Penn State guys are kind of doing this like cross-training, and they're always like, they've been dominating wrestling for like a decade plus at this point.
Okay.
And they're just known for being like having a ton of fun, being really loose out there.
That's cool.
I think a lot of it's from the coaching, Cale Sanderson, and no one really knows what he does in that room. But it seems like he's pretty hands-off. So, I don't really know how their coaching goes down there, but they really just have a lot of fun and just always look to improve their wrestling and get creative. So
that is so cool. Like, is that kind of a known thing of like different, especially like D1 schools where they have like different vibes, and then wrestlers, do they kind of pick a school based off the vibe they want? And obviously part of it's opportunity too, right? Like very few people can just be like cream of the crop, like, I'll pick whatever school I wish. But like, is that kind of like a known thing? Cause like, so you said Penn State's like that. Did like Princeton have a certain vibe you knew coming in or anything like that?
Yeah, Princeton was actually interesting. So I didn't pick up on this at first when I was getting recruited, but our head coach at the time, Chris Ayers, he was a walk-on actually to Lehigh's wrestling team. A walk-on means he didn't get recruited. He never even placed at the state tournament.
Oh.
He became an All-American in college because he worked really hard.
Dang.
And just had like...
just showed up and just was like, this looks fun, and then just kept doing it?
Yeah, he was just like a average high school wrestler.
Okay.
Maybe slightly above average. And then just kept working at it.
Okay.
Got his butt whooped in the room a lot, and then one day just put it all together.
Dang.
And started dominating people.
That's cool. So what kind of perspective did he bring?
So I think he was a little more analytical than any other coach I've ever had. So... I'm sure that's how he approached his game and how he got good so fast. Yeah. So when I got recruited, I didn't realize that was like, his coaching style.
Okay.
But once I got there, he had like, what do we call it? We had a book called The Higher Standard. And it was like this really nice book. I should have brought it in actually. And it had like his whole coaching philosophy, why we have the schedule broken down the way it is. Exactly what every week of practice is going to look like, and then why we have it broken down that way.
That's awesome. It's like a charter to your trip.
Yeah, exactly. And he always was trying to find ways to tweak it and find any little gain we could make, And it had nutritional stuff. It had great quotes. Like anything you wanted was in there.
That's cool.
And
wow, that sounds awesome.
I can tell you right away that most wrestling coaches do not have all of that laid out. And he also at one point even had us using heart rate monitors and like chest monitors just to see how the practices were affecting us and to see how run down we were. And I think each week too, we would get a Google form. And it would say, like, what's your energy level today? How much did you sleep last night? Like, he was trying to get all the data possible.
Awesome.
Just to find any way to get you, like, especially if you're a guy who's, like, you're close to a breakthrough and you have, like, moments of greatness, you know? It's like, how can we bring that out? So I think he was super analytical. And, you know, go figure, you're at Princeton University. And they're trying to use science and stuff like that. So I thought it was super cool and fitting for the school.
That's so cool because I'm just imagining like all these Google Forms filing into a dashboard for him and be like, oh, the general vibe of the room's a 6. Okay, maybe we got to bring it down a little bit. Or like, oh, wow, the room's really high. Or, wow, there's a huge discrepancy between the group. Like, what's going on here? And
also, he's been gathering this data. Well, he's not the head coach anymore. He left. He was at Princeton for a long time, like 14 plus years. He's at Stanford now. But our assistant coach at the time is now the head coach, and he still does the same stuff. So what's cool is it's been 7 years since I've been in school, 7 or 8. So they have that data over the years, and they can see, like, everyone sleeps really crappy in December, and that explains why we all perform poorly at the Midlands tournament in December, you know? So you can start to figure out seasonal differences.
Cool.
But a lot of it also coincides with the school schedule.
Okay.
So it's like maybe we're run down from finals or something, you know? And I know they did recently change when finals and things are. So there's a lot of variables, but I mean, you won't know anything if you don't get the data. So it's cool to see them practice and preach that.
Jordan, that's so cool. You're throwing me a curveball here. I didn't think we were going to talk about this, but this is so, I'm just imagining like taking this data, throw it into a GPT and be like, what do you see that I don't? You know, because they might even be like, oh, you know, here's a really cool insight you never noticed. And like, oh my God. And you have 10 years of data or 20 years of data.
I have one fun one. So, so I was the only person my class year where we had me wear the chest heart rate monitor in a match, like an actual match.
You try it? That's cool.
He goes, Laster, you want to do this? And I was like, all right, let's see. So we went against Columbia. I destroyed the guy. But what's interesting is in the room, in the practice room, when we go live or we have like a simulation match, like to get ready for actual matches, when I wear the chest monitor, my heart rate gets up to like 150, 160, like nothing crazy. My body just knows I'm about to go hard. But in the match, the second the whistle blew, it shot up to like 190.
Whoa.
And
then the adrenaline and everything?
Yeah.
Dang.
The second the whistle blew. So it's like I'm this conditioned mammal.
That's awesome.
Who has my heart rate shoot up anytime the whistle's blown.
It'd be funny if he blows the whistle in the training room. Does it do the same?
Yeah.
When you hear whistles now, you just jump to 190?
In the training room, even if they use it, like it didn't do the same. But it shot up to 190 and then shortly after just stayed within like 150, 160 range. So
like a dump of adrenaline and then you were good to go.
So it's super interesting to see, you know, if coaches really want to simulate a match, that's the sort of data you could look at. Like, did his heart rate shoot up there? Like, and in the practice room, it's just not, it's close, but it's not the same. And I know before nationals too, sometimes he would put on like people clapping, like that soundtrack, and it's just nonstop clapping and like yelling and stuff. But that, I always tune that out, so I found that didn't really affect me. But yeah, that's like an interesting tidbit we kind of got out of it.
That is so cool.
I like that.
That's really cool. I'm thinking about it a lot. Like data is like a big part of my job, so I'm just like, all the like possibilities. Okay, no, this is awesome. So wrestling. I'm going to call you a great wrestler. You don't have to call yourself a great one, but I'm going to say you were a great wrestler.
Excellent. But you're great.
Amazing wrestler. Okay, and you've actually been trying to adapt wrestling for jiu-jitsu, right? And it seems like it's actually on kind of two different poles, but you're focusing mainly on how to give jiu-jitsu players the ability to wrestle versus trying to turn wrestlers into jiu-jitsu folks, right?
Yep.
Okay. So what would you say the state of stand-up in jiu-jitsu is right now in 1 to 2 words?
Abysmal.
Okay. So if it's not where it could be, I guess, so where do you think people should start when it comes to learning? Actually, sorry, let me rewind. I'm going to ask a different question. Why is wrestling important to learn if you're a jiu-jitsu player?
Yeah, I think if you know how to wrestle well, you can take a jiu-jitsu match or fight. I don't even know what it's called still. I'll just call it a match. You can take it.
Match is a good name, I think.
Because it's not a fight. There's no
Yeah,
fighting.
people call it fight. I feel like they're kind of like embellishing
The
a
two
little bit.
jiu-jitsu fighters, like,
Yeah.
have you seen guys pull guard?
Bump butts if you both pull guard. All right. But no, okay.
Yeah, so I would say if you can wrestle well, you can take the match anywhere you want to go. And
That's a good definition.
even if you're a good wrestler and you've never done jiu-jitsu and you're below someone, there's still a lot of transferable skills like neck bridges, explosive stand-ups, and there's still things you can do to get off the bottom. Or one that's more advanced is like if someone's moving their legs towards me, I can do a leg pass, which is like another weird scramble to get out of jiu-jitsu stuff. We haven't really covered that, but that's something I brought up to you before.
Is that the one where you like leg or like alligator roll with their leg over you?
Yeah.
That one's weird. I remember the first time he did that to me, I was just like, what is going on here? Because it wasn't an attack. When someone gets your foot, you're usually attacking.
Right. And you can turn it into a takedown and then get on top. So
That's cool.
There's still a lot of stuff you can do just from having the wrestling. And I think actually one of the more important ones is just having a good base. So the more familiar you get with wrestling and gaining balance and keeping your head up and your hips in and back straight in a lot of positions, the better your base is and the more unlikely it is that you'll get swept.
That's actually something you've taught me. Like I've learned that was probably all the different techniques you've shown and whatnot. The biggest takeaway has been it seems like you're always in a place that you can apply force, and then you can apply force again if you need to. Like it's that was a huge change. That before I started wrestling with you and you showing all these different things and just watching you compete and watching you roll and just watching you sleep and things like that, you know. But it was a joke. Nobody got it. Okay, I was being creepy.
I got it.
But honestly, it seems like you're never, or very rarely, are you out of a position where you couldn't stand up, move back, do some type of movement. Versus like people think about takedowns as these like spearing motions where it's actually you got nothing. If this doesn't work, you're essentially on your stomach, right? Or you're just shooting at them and you're going to face plant. Versus that's actually not the case,
It's
right?
kind of like inverse of what Rob was talking about. Of like, was it those leg attacks?
Oh yeah,
the ability that he can be able to get up when he wants to right now or disengage.
Yes.
Because I noticed that a lot with Jordan in the last couple of your matches. Like you always had the ability to pull back if you wanted to.
Right.
Like he never was like caught in something where he couldn't get up and out of it. Like engage, if it's feeling weird, you disengage and reapproached it.
I just thought of this just right now. I think there's a lot of give and take in combat sports. So I think wrestling is actually the greatest form of that, other than maybe like sumo wrestling, but which I experienced recently. But what I mean by that is in wrestling, you can't always just force stuff, because if you do, you usually end up getting taken down or you're out of position. And if someone tries to force stuff against you, you can let them take a little bit of ground to set up your own stuff. I think in jiu-jitsu, you have some give and take, but without the wrestling component, you really don't fully understand how to give ground and allow people to put themselves in bad positions, but also how to take ground and exploit it when they're letting you take it. So
why do you think that is?
Why do I think that wrestling is really good for that?
Yeah, why is it just like seem to be an intrinsic part of good wrestling, but yet some guys who are good at jiu-jitsu, or maybe if you're good at jiu-jitsu, you understand this already too, like if you're really, really high level. But yeah, they don't seem to, the give and take is a little bit different.
I think, so just thinking through it more, this is kind of just a brain dump, but
Yeah.
I think when you're on the ground in jiu-jitsu and there's a lot of give and take, it's still just not the same as on your feet, because on your feet there are many more possibilities of the give and take. And if you just don't have that sort of feel for it, you can't then transfer that over to your top game, for instance. Like that's why a lot of people who don't wrestle have really bad bases, because they just don't understand like, hey, I'm actually off balance here because I haven't trained this and I don't understand like they're taking ground here and I should actually pull back a little bit instead of just leaning into it and now I'm on my back.
That's a really great analogy. I'm kind of like visualizing it right now, where it's your ability to apply force. You need the ability to apply and absorb force at any moment because of the chaos of standing.
Yep.
And your advancements are more subtle until they're not, essentially, which just sounds kind of like a cop-out of a thing to say, but like, because you can't overcommit and lose your base.
Actually, I think
keep going.
I was going to say, I think what you just said there, chaos. I actually think it's the chaos of the stand-up game that allows people to get better at that give and take because there's so many more variables and movements and you're using every single muscle possible to stay up while also trying to get
exhausting.
them down. Yeah.
It's so tiring.
I think that's why it really is the greatest form of give and take. And like give and take needs to really be defined better here, but those are the two words that came to my mind.
I think that's where a lot of people lean a lot more towards like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu side of it with the gi. It's so slow.
Yep.
It's so slow. But it's easier for people to, I should say a slower pace of grappling. It doesn't mean it's more technical by any means, but just like there's just like you can see things a lot more and you can take your time with grips versus, a stand-up chaos. I think a lot of people, especially the lack of training, can't keep up with the chaos, as you say. But I was going to say before, I think it just with jiu-jitsu people, from what I've seen, I think a lot of jiu-jitsu people are more focused on positional and points versus the priorities of like their base. Like kind of like a Rob thing, right? Like he would rather preserve his base and disengage than maybe go forward and say, here's a point, or I'm holding side control and I'm maintaining this point position, and now you're getting swept. Versus like if I'm getting swept and I disengage, now they're regarding or whatever, but that's the priority. Is the base.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into this point I just thought of is in class recently for wrestling, I've been teaching single legs, and a lot of people just like fall down as they take the person down. And it's like, well, you just fell into their guard, or you just fell down and now you actually don't have a takedown because the chaos you just created by falling and not keeping control allowed them to get space and now reorient themselves, and now you have to pass their guard. But what I'm trying to get at there is, at least for me, control is number one. If you don't have control of a position and you're trying to force something, that's when they exploit it. Now you're in a sub or you get swept. But if you keep control of the situation and you're like, hey, you know what? I don't like this position. I'm just going to pull back a little bit or disengage, and now I'm going to get back to my stuff. You can dictate the match, and when you dictate a match, mentally, you feel much more in it. But when you can't dictate it, mentally you're like, oh no, like, I'm defending everything here. I'm getting tired. This guy's wearing me out physically, mentally.
So that feels more like you're controlling your ego a little bit versus what the technical side, which might be difficult maybe with wrestling a little bit because like you said, you're kind of, trying to dominate. But what you're saying with that is saying that you're analyzing the situation and making technical decisions versus I think a lot of jiu-jitsu people get very egotistical. Like, I'm here, I'm not, like, conceding ground right now. Like, I'm not backing up.
Oh.
They're going to stay there. That's what I'm saying, like, the Hickson Gracie thing of where he'd compare jiu-jitsu with, like, climbing a ladder, where he goes, I go one rung up, I don't go one rung down.
Which is funny because Gordon Ryan will go back down rungs.
Go back, yeah.
I'm saying it's one of the greatest grapplers ever, and he's just like, he's totally fine with regressing if he doesn't feel like he has a solid position, and he's having to force it, like you were saying.
But that's the technical side of it, right? He understands that it's worth technically, but, like, maybe an old Brazilian bravado is like, no, I take this, like, you're not getting it back. But now, like, you're caught in something, either getting swept or submitted or whatever. So it's saying the same thing. It's just saying you're looking at more of a technical thing versus I think a lot of jiu-jitsu people, like, if you're re-engaging a guard and you're backing up, it's almost like you failed. Versus, like, sitting here, like, pecking apart something in a technical way versus saying, like, no, I get here, like, if I'm backing off, that means he's winning or whatever. Like, I think it's more from a jiu-jitsu standpoint of seeing from a lot of people, like, it's not because Jordan can just peck apart guards, but it's because you're seeing the guard and what you just said about being in control.
I just think about when I first started jiu-jitsu too. A lot of times guys would get me in leg locks and I'm tapping like every 2 seconds, but I'm like, my ego is saying, just keep trying the same stuff. And eventually you're like, all right, this isn't going to work. This is by definition insane. So it's like, okay, you know what? Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step in. Maybe when he goes for the leg lock, I'm going to step out and see if I can clear it and then retry to enter after I like change the position a little bit. So just by checking yourself and mentally controlling your ego, you can go a long way, and you can start to really figure things out. It's like, okay, if I step in the fire and then I step out, like, oh, I'm still safe. But if I step in the fire and stay in there, this is why I keep tapping, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm almost imagining this like dichotomy we build in our heads sometimes with jiu-jitsu where, okay, say you overcommit. Because, right, it sounds like if I'm going to use two specific words, having good wrestling stance and just like the wrestling vibe is to be committed to your movements, but not overly committed that you can't then back out, right? Or be able to maintain your ability to apply force. And your options, if you were, say, like diving in for some type of single leg or something like that, it's like, okay, you could be stubborn about it and not change your plan and potentially have to work out of a triangle, or you could disengage early and just repass. And it's kind of funny because when you put it like that, do you want to pass guard or do you want to work out of a triangle? I think almost everybody would say pass guard because at least I got something going on versus getting my neck squeezed.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, I guess the option never occurred to me until you started showing me all this wrestling stuff, and just the fact that you can stand up out of so many spots, that just disengaging is totally cool.
Yep.
And just patiently coming back. You're not running away from the match. You're just patiently resetting. Why fight from a bad spot, or play from a bad spot?
I would say wrestling is a sport of creating opportunities. So you create them with fakes, hand fighting, getting your opponent off balance.
Okay.
Sometimes when you get them guessing and on their second foot, and have them defensive, then they start to make mistakes. That's like bad shots and stuff. But it's also 100% committing to your attacks.
Okay.
So I know we talked about being able to disengage, and there is a lot of disengaging in wrestling too, and just kind of seeing what they do. But when you do go, you have to go hard because a lot of people get in trouble when they hesitate. So an example is if I shoot a high crotch or a single leg, but I'm like 25% unsure, you're going to see that because I'm shooting, maybe my head's pulled away a little bit and down.
Okay.
And now I'm getting sprawled on, and it's like, crap, I should have just fully went through it, And you'll find a lot of times in wrestling, this was like a huge wake-up call for me. I think my sophomore, junior year of college, my coach was like, dude, just fully commit. And a lot of times fully committing to a single leg will be, instead of shooting with one hand from distance, shoot with both.
Oh, dang.
That makes you a little quicker.
That's a little scary, isn't it?
It can be. But then you do it and you're like, whoa, I didn't even... Like sometimes I would shoot the single leg, I'd get to the single leg, and then for like half a second, I'm like, I didn't even know I had the leg.
That's awesome. What do I do? Oh, yeah.
I like got there so fast, So yeah, wrestling does have a lot of disengaging and being patient. But it's like the second the opportunity is there, especially in college wrestling and beyond, where it's really hard to even get to someone's leg.
That's got to be
You have to
so
go
hard.
all in. If you don't go all in, you're not going to get it.
I feel like, you give them like a nanosecond. Some of those guys, like they're just like, nope, that's all I needed to reorient, analyze, and be able to disengage or counter or
and
something
that
like
might have
that.
been your one opportunity the whole match.
Whoa.
So it's like you have to go. So it's a sport where you really learn how to commit to things too, but being smart with it. A lot of times too, you could go 100% on something, get into a crap position, and it's like, okay, I went all in. He still sprawled on me and stuffed it. I'm just going to come up to an underhook, get back to the hand fight.
Okay.
And that's a way to kind of pull back.
Okay. Whew, that's cool. There's one more thing that's kind of cool with when because like you're obviously the best wrestler I've ever done jiu-jitsu with. And when you verse people, because your stand-up is so overwhelming and so good, you were saying how you can kind of dictate a lot of the match, and there's like so much truth to this. And like just to kind of explain that thought a little bit for some of our listeners, when you go against someone who's really good at wrestling, if you stand up with them, you're going to probably lose. Okay. And that's just, especially someone who's been wrestling for 20 years, right? That's just the reality of it. Just like if someone who just joined jiu-jitsu and you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 years, you're going to be better at jiu-jitsu than it's a hard math equation. It's what it is. Okay. So then you're like, okay, well then I'll have to play guard. But then the problem is if everybody knows that you're a good wrestler, that your opponent's a good wrestler, they're going to be used to the fact that people pull guard on them because they know they can't out wrestle them. So now you're funneled into playing guard. Yep. And then on top of that, you're more used to then passing people's guard because they have to pull guard on you because that's the thing that they might actually have an opportunity on versus standing. So you've essentially funneled your opponent into having to play a type of guard. And unless they're a very good guard player where they're like, no, I wanted to play guard the whole time, you've actually just funneled their entire game into a pass that you can pass because you've seen it a million times.
Right.
Like, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, they actually give me my focus. So my first focus was, I remember my first day of jiu-jitsu, I took someone down, and I was in their guard, and I was like, how do I get out of this? It was weird. And I was in a gi, so like it was even harder because they could just grab my collar, and I'm just stuck in there.
Yeah.
And that's when I learned that behind the back.
Love that pass. Yeah, I love that one.
The very first thing I ever learned.
It's a good one.
And from there, though, then I like really focused on just passing guard. So to your point, jiu-jitsu gave me my first focus. Well, the gi definitely did because everyone's just hanging on and putting me in guard. But when I got to jiu-jitsu, I didn't have to think much about what to do. It was just right there because people were sitting to their butts, or I'd take them down, and now I had to figure out how to get on top of them.
That's cool that you have that like black belt level card you can pull out at any time, right? Where you're just like, okay, I'm going to play this right now, like for standing and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's super cool. Okay, so I'm going to jump into some more meatier questions.
Good.
Okay. So, I think you did a great job of laying out like why jiu-jitsu needs wrestling, right? And why it gives you a whole nother tool to use. And it's very pragmatic in that it gives you options, right? And you want all the options, and you want to dictate what options your opponent do and don't have. So learning wrestling, though, can be a little bit intimidating for people. So my first question on this topic would be like, why do you think people find it intimidating?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when a jiu-jitsu person first sees wrestling, they think of like big throws, big jacked, scary people. And at least that's what I've heard too in the room. Like I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm afraid of just getting slammed and landing wrong." And I think a lot of people in jiu-jitsu are older too. Older being like post-college.
Yeah.
And that's when people really start to think about, injuries, or they've done a lot of sports when they were a kid and they've amassed injuries, or their knees are messed
Mileage.
up. Sometimes too, it's just you haven't taken care of yourself for 20 years because you didn't play a ton of sports or anything.
Yeah, sometimes this is their first sport.
Exactly.
Which is crazy.
And you just never learned how to like get your knees in shape. And we also live in a society where we sit all the time, sitting to watch TV or for work, and that's just not good for your joints and stuff. So I think all those factors kind of play a role in it. But I think at the end of the day, the one I've probably heard the most is I just don't want to get slammed and hurt
Get
something.
hurt. Yeah. The ROI is tricky on it.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's very high demand, and at first it's going to be a little tough to see some benefits, just like in anything you do, right? But once you do, it's pretty awesome having like a couple tricks, or a couple spells would be a better word for it. You got a couple spells you can throw out.
Have you seen other wrestling programs at jiu-jitsu schools before? Because you were at Unity.
I was at Unity.
Did they have any sort of wrestling's not a good word for it. Stand-up's like striking.
We never did stand-up while I was there.
Okay. They never broached you either? I mean,
no.
As far as like, hey, we got a decent guy here wrestling to
I only went there for like 2 to 3 months.
Sure,
I think maybe if I was there longer.
Yeah.
Possibly. And I was just starting to get back into it. So I was like definitely out of shape and like not putting my best foot forward.
Sure.
But I think when I was at my first gym, and it's called Aspen MMA in Colorado, that's where like they started asking me right away, like, hey, you want to show some wrestling? And I remember I showed this guy Vance, who's now a fighter, a blast double.
Okay.
And in the jiu-jitsu tournament, I think it was his first one, like a month later, I see a highlight clip of him blast doubling people.
That's awesome. That's cool.
And I was like, dude, that's awesome. He's like, yeah, you taught me well, man.
Just teach them one thing, and they're like, there you go. That's all you need.
And in his fights, too, he's taking guys down and subbing them. So it's really cool to see. Like, you don't, in jiu-jitsu, we're going to get into it, but you only need 1 to 2 moves, really, because the level of jiu-jitsu is very bad right now. It's definitely gotten better since I started, since my first day ever going to a jiu-jitsu class. But it's still really bad. So I just think if you learn 1 or 2 takedowns and you get good at it and just have like a couple entries, you're money. Like
nice.
You can dictate most matches you're going to be in until wrestling catches up.
So on that topic, okay, so we talk about why people should, some of the hesitancy. I think part of one thing to touch on before we jump into maybe some specifics on like what kind of techniques people should be learning and focusing on is talking about like training culture and keeping people safe too, though. Yeah. Because there's, I think, a preconceived notion about wrestling and stand-up and what the training needs to look like.
Yep.
Because so people who are listening who haven't ever trained with Jordan, if there is one person on the planet you're least likely to get injured rolling with, it's Jordan. Because you're so technical and you're never falling on people. In fact, if you get injured rolling with Jordan, it's because someone else from another match fell on you. That's probably what happened.
That's funny.
So, but there's actually like the energy you have when you're teaching wrestling class isn't this like grinding people down. It's I guess, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm glad you went here because I kind of forgot about this. So in wrestling, a lot of programs I've been in have just been like you work hard, be the hardest worker in the room, sprints at the end of every practice, 3-hour practices. You're a wimp if you're not here every single day going as hard as you can. If you're injured, just guard that arm, And I do think a lot of that mentality got me really good. I had some really good coaches.
It had its place.
Yeah, it definitely had its place. It got me mentally very strong. It's not for everybody, but I did see it work out for a lot of my friends. But I think where it's a little different is that's when we were all kids, and as young men and also young women, that's our most impressionable time. So like that's when you can really get someone tough and strong. But
Plus
I think
they're durable. Kids are durable.
Yes.
Like, you can do a lot of dumb stuff as a coach probably and get away with it.
Exactly. So I think it is a good time for that. But now when I started coaching here at Theory, I had to keep in mind, like, wait a second, everyone's an adult.
Yeah.
And that was a little weird for me at first because I was like, how do I structure this so that it's not like too easy, but can still get it across and get them a good workout and still teaching them the principles of wrestling and that, hey, like this doesn't have to be nose to the grindstone, but you can still get a good workout out of this and get some good takedowns and, and just learn how it all works too. So I think the culture has been interesting. I do find some days I do want to bring more of that grind mentality, not like grinding your body down, but just like working hard.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is still a place for that with adults. And I often times when I have done that in here, people have said after practice, like, that was a great practice. Like, I really liked that.
Yeah.
So it is really encouraging to see that adults still want to go hard like that. I know I do.
Yeah.
But I grew up in that,
I'm sure to the point where you're bringing about with safety too. Like, I don't feel like, I don't even know how to word it, but like when you're going through takedowns and things like that, like I'm sure the intensity is not like, do it at all costs, throw this person down. Like, I'm sure there's a couple people who have been here from Theory going to a wrestling class or just brand new going like, ooh, I'm a little hesitant, but they see all their friends in class and they're like, okay, like, this looks good. I'm going to jump into it. So where do you think gyms then, where do you think that mindset comes in from people who feel like they're afraid of like these big throws and big takedowns? Like, do you think it's just what people see on like highlight reel type stuff or heard in matches kind of stuff?
Social media is great because it helps spread wrestling and jiu-jitsu and stuff, but it's also like, obviously it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's bad because it also shows the highlight reels, which are usually like a suplex.
Yeah. Onto somebody's neck.
And that's what everyone thinks it is. And it's like, no, wrestling is actually incredibly safe. The main reason people get hurt is because they're new to the sport and they try to go too hard without knowing anything.
Similar to jiu-jitsu a little bit too.
Yeah.
Arm locks and joint locks and all that stuff.
Like true with anything, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, Forrest and I were running hill sprints this morning. I haven't ran hill sprints in a while. I'll admit, I totally like kind of grandpa jogged some of them just to like get the joints ready. And I today didn't go 100% because like I'll probably hurt myself if I did. And it's just, you just got to like condition yourself to the activities you enjoy.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely that. I think, I definitely think social media is not great in that regard. But once you get someone in their first wrestling class, and as a coach, like this is where it's super important, especially with the adults, you really have to show them like, hey, we're going to go slow with this. I know there's been a few instances in here where I've shown stuff and guys think they're ready to go after like one rep, and then they go too hard and get off task, and that's where injuries start to happen. So it's like really making sure I walk around and say like, hey, slow it down. Like, there's no shame in going really slow here. I want you to understand the technique here so that when you do this in a competition or you're just rolling, one, you're being safe because it's the most technical way to do it. When you're doing stuff technically correct, you're not like elbowing someone in the head or something hitting them with your head when you bring your head up because your head should already be up.
Is that where you see like most of the injuries happen? Like more of like a collision of bodies versus like
a lot of
landing
times,
from a double or something like that?
A lot of times it's not really, at least in my experience, it's not all the time from landing where I see the injuries. It's usually like elbows or like a headbutt.
I would not think about that.
Or if I shoot in on a single leg, my head's down.
Yeah.
And then they start sprawling on me and I just whip my head back. Like just dumb stuff. That would like never happen if you kind of knew what you were doing and took it slow.
No, when I had that hematoma on my eye
That's right.
with Corey,
Yeah.
I had bad technique. I did like a kind of like a trip from the side.
Yeah.
I wasn't
that
tight to him.
swelled up quick.
He put his hands on the mat, and then his head went forward and snapped back. My head snapped in. within like minutes, my eye was just swelling. It was crazy. I've never had that bad of a black eye. And if I would have had good technique though, that wouldn't have happened. He could have moved his head wherever he wanted.
Right.
And my head should have been glued to him or something. Maybe.
Now, to be fair though, I coached at a high school in New York City for a year, and then COVID hit, and that was sad face. But we had a kid who was a newcomer, and he went against another new guy, and the guy, Matt, returned him, and he landed weird, and then his elbow basically popped out. It looked awful. So it does happen from landing, for sure.
But I know you go through warm-ups where you're like, if you go through like rolls and cartwheels and things like that. So
I like the warm-up.
But it is kind of translating towards like having that awareness of like your body. So when you're coming to the ground, like I don't think, does wrestling teach like break volley type stuff, or like being able to kind of catch yourself on the ground, I would say.
We'll show like a quick way to catch yourself, but there's definitely not a lot of time spent on that, because you kind of get it. You kind of learn that pretty quickly after a few reps. And like maybe if it's someone's first day, I'll be like, hey, just make sure you land like this your first few. But I will say the warm up is actually a very subtle way to teach someone how to land. Yeah. So wrestling, a lot of warm ups have tumbling in them. And one, it's to get you like a little more explosive and comfortable.
Yeah. I really like your warm up. I've actually started using that a lot. Like, I think it's awesome.
We did that growing up. Like I learned the warm up that way. I taught it that way. And then I've always tweaked it a little bit, just depending on what I need for competition. But it gets your body in every position possible. So for people listening.
Have you made a video on your warm up?
I haven't. Yeah.
That'd be really good.
I should do that.
Yeah.
Does that app you use sometimes, is that kind of, could be an avenue for like warming up too?
Oh, Stance in Motion app?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they could throw some stuff in there.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their own system though.
Sure.
But I found for me, it's usually just for those listening, like a lot of times what I'll do for warm up is like 10 minutes, just jogging, skipping, rolling out your arms, your neck. Then we'll throw in like forward rolls, backward rolls. Depends how adventurous you want to get. Sometimes we used to do like backflips and round offs, walking on your hands. You could just throw in any tumbling you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. You do crawls.
Bear crawl.
You do like the stance walk, which sounds silly to people who don't know that, but it's actually really helpful, and I really like it.
Yes. Walking in your stance. They call it stalking, which is probably not the best term.
It's like a zombie.
Sprawls. Sometimes we'll do sprawl to sprint, sprawl reattack, shots, like emulating wrestling moves without a partner. And then I also really like to throw in footwork. So like jumping over a line, alternating feet. That way, because in wrestling, a lot of times I'm more of a quick guy, so I like to move my feet a lot. So I have found if I don't move my feet quickly as a warm-up, they're a little slow this first minute or two when I go out. But if I do get a good like foot fire and like get my feet moving fast, I feel more confident in it. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like
it kind of primes you to like get cooking.
My feet are ready to go, you know?
Yeah.
So I love throwing that in there too.
I like that. Okay. So we talked a lot about general stuff. We should probably talk about a few techniques. Yeah. Is that a good idea? Go over there. Okay. Yeah. So you talked about like people only need like one or two techniques.
Yep.
Where should they focus their time for the best ROI, maybe safest? What should that look like?
Yeah. So I think it was my second wrestling practice here at Theory. It was Tim. Tim asked, Jordan, what's like the best ROI wrestling technique?
Nice.
Like, no one has ever asked me that before. And I remember reading an article, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. I tried to find it recently because I'm writing an article on like how you should teach wrestling for jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Or at least my take on it. And what it said was the sprawl go behind is the number one takedown in wrestling.
So you're saying defensively, they shoot on you, you sprawl on them and go around?
Yeah. Or, I mean, you could snap them down and go behind. I think it was the go behind is the number one takedown.
Oh.
So a lot of times the go behind is someone shoots, I sprawl, now I go around them. So
kind of demoralizing if you're trying to get good at single legs, knowing that the best move is the one that they're going to do to you.
But it's also invigorating because it's like, hey, if I just get really freaking good at defense and I go against an elite wrestler who's been doing wrestling for 20 plus years or whatever, and I know I have no chance with my offense, I can just sprawl on him. And here's the thing I love about it. In jiu-jitsu, wrestling, a lot of options get eliminated when you are under someone in jiu-jitsu because you have to respect the choke. In wrestling, we don't have to respect the choke. So we can still explore a ton of different options to finish like a single or double or whatever, or get from underneath the sprawl. But in jiu-jitsu, I have to respect it. So now I'm just looking for your hand so I don't get choked out instead of trying to finish the single leg.
Okay.
So it's like you'll see it in MMA a lot, actually. So if you see a striker against a really good wrestler, man, I wish I had some examples in mind right now, but I see it a lot. One striker goes against good wrestler shoots on him, striker just got really good at sprawling, stuffs the takedown, and now starts beating him up on the feet.
Yeah, or even, what was it, Connor and Nate Diaz, the second one, I think. Didn't Connor just work a bunch of like takedown defense? And so essentially he'd try to get against the fence and would just keep working. Like, he didn't have to learn how to wrestle. He had to learn how to prevent the wrestling taking him down.
Right.
And I can't remember how it all played out and whatnot, but I remember he spent a lot of time just digging underhooks, getting against the fence, making sure he had a good stance, not giving him his leg. And that was pretty much like, it seemed like the whole game plan if Nate shot on him.
And it's not just sprawl. Like, I would say sprawl is your highest ROI, but it's also the front headlock position. So I kind of include both of those in the same category.
Okay.
And then obviously go behinds are like ways to score from that. But imagine in jiu-jitsu you have a really freaking good guillotine or Darce or Anaconda series, and you go against a good wrestler, and you also got your sprawls really good in the front headlock position. Now you can just start trying to sub him right away instead of thinking like, I'm about to get taken down like 10 times in this match.
That's pretty cool. So the front headlock position is like super tiring, at least for me. Do you like, I always joke around that I need better arm cardio. Do you find there's like some technical details that might help people to have better control of that position?
Yeah, I would say one of the big rules in that position is T-Rex arms. A lot of people will take their arms and they'll get overextended and like try to wrap over their chest. And there are some techniques from wrapping over the chest, but that's like advanced stuff. You should not be doing that your first few days.
Okay.
It's just T-Rex arms. I like to keep my hands on the back of their triceps.
Okay.
So from there, that keeps your head underneath my chest. We want the head in a cage, so his head or your opponent's head can't come out. And then once they get their head out, then they can start, trying to take you down again. But if you're good at guillotines and stuff, you could always exploit that. But yeah.
But on your own terms, right?
Right.
Like, then you give them up an access point out and then...
Yep.
Okay.
But you're grabbing behind the triceps, but like elbows in. Right? So that's the whole T-Rex thing.
Okay.
The whole purpose is you want to control them. So if I have my hands on his tricep, I can move him how I want to. You're up on your toes, so you can move easily.
Okay.
And try to go behind. And you have the head underneath your chest, and it can't pop out.
What about that chin strap kind of grab? What do you think of that?
Yeah, so that's technically the front headlock.
Okay.
Once you get that chin strap, and then so you have one hand on the chin, your elbow's in, so their head's stuck inside underneath your chest, and then your other hand goes on their tricep, or you can lift up the arm. That's the front headlock position.
Do you think it's for people, right? This is who are new to wrestling.
Yep.
Should they shoot for go for the two tricep grab or go for the headlock grab? Which one, if you had to pick one to be like, focus on this one, which one would it be?
The reason why I say the two triceps to start is because people, when they go for the chin strap, I see it every time I teach it in here, their arm goes too deep. When your arm gets too deep on a front headlock, there's this move called the sucker drag.
Yeah, you've hit me with that one quite a few times.
Where all I do is I pull your elbow in even deeper, and then I just grab around your back.
Okay.
Now I'm on your back.
I've seen a lot of people do front headlocks and they like almost try to connect their arms. Like once they snap down, like just like almost like a weird, over under kind of wrap. Like it feels like you're holding the person versus, maybe having double triceps or what like separate, like you're not connected may feel weaker initially.
Right.
Like, it just feels like I'm holding two parts versus like I'm holding your chest. Like this feels good.
What are you doing with the triceps? I think maybe that'll help because that's a really good point, right? Like the watch grab idea, you feel like you're doing something, right? You're like, I'm squeezing something.
But I think that's more for like the submission aspect of it. But I think people mix the submission guillotine hold with control. And that's not the case.
Yeah,
Saying
with the
they're different?
triceps, your hands are on them, you're keeping your elbows in, and what you're doing is you're able to pull them. So I can pull them to the right, to the left, and you're going to want to be pulling them so that it's easier for you to try to go to one side or the other side.
So what are you looking for when you're pulling them? Like what's the green flag of like, go, like, what do you see?
So a lot of times when you have someone in that position, they don't want their head on the mat, because if their head's on the mat, it's easy just to go around because your body goes where your head does. So they're already like, all their force is going down. I can just go around. But if their head's up, which they naturally want to do, what I'm trying to do is pull them to get either their head down
Oh.
or pull them one way, and then as they're going and moving that way, I can start going the other way to get behind them.
So you shuck. So I say you shuck their head to the right. And I'm trying to like verbalize this,
Yeah.
right? So they shuck their head to the right, their right. You're going to your right, their left to
Right.
go around.
Yep.
Gotcha. You're extending them that way, breaking their posture, opening the side to go that
Yeah.
way.
It's all about extending them, getting them off balance, getting their head down.
This is great stuff, Jordan. It's funny because like you've taught me a bunch of wrestling classes, and I'm like sitting here going like, this is good stuff. Like, like just like the walking through it though of like what I'm trying to do from that position.
Yep.
The idea of going down with it, never even thought about it until you literally just
I
said
think the
it.
difficult part from my perspective of 20 years of jiu-jitsu is, quite honestly, lots of jiu-jitsu coaches I've met have little to no experience with wrestling.
Yep.
Like everyone's thrown or shown, like, same with judo. Here's a hip throw.
Yeah.
Here's a single leg. Like it's not mechanics, but it's like just showing the move versus like both judo and wrestling is just a whole skill set, a whole art form. But that's the hard part. We have an art form that it is separate. It is a umbrella term for the submission grapple, what we're doing, but there's different expertise, like there's wrestling and judo. What I'm trying to push for too is like you should have a separate leg lock coach too. Like in all honesty, like that is almost a separate entity as itself. But I say that because like, you know, Jordan's given us advice about holding grips, but it's like, how does the huge 99% of population of jiu-jitsu get access to that kind of stuff?
Right.
You know, it's like, it's hard to sit and point fingers at jiu-jitsu coaches, but it's like,
They just don't know.
But that's where it stems from. Same with leg locks. Like all these members, I say with theory, but like all these students in competitions, like they have really crappy wrestling, or really crappy leg locks. It's like, it's not them necessarily. It's like, but it defaults with the coaches. Like, yes, you can go on your content and instructionals and find these kind of things, but it's just like, you know, it's the responsibility of the coaches to bring it to them at that kind of point.
It's one of those you
I know
don't
I
know what
ranted
you
there,
don't
but-
know. No, that's a
Yeah.
good point though.
But I'm saying like this is where I think a lot of people go like, why don't you do wrestling or whatever? And from my experience, which is why I love Jordan coming in here, it's like I hardly knew anything. But the thing is, like, even if Jordan were to disappear, I feel like I would have to have some other wrestling coach come in to bring that higher level up. Like it would take me forever, and like they're very close to me in my skill level of it. It's like I feel like coaches either need to bring in other outside wrestling experience or coaches to elevate the game versus thinking it's all coming from
who know and understand jiu-jitsu, right? Because
But
then you're not
there's so
giving
many
it
more
backs up.
college opportunities of people locally or bringing someone to teach. Would you think like a college wrestler, knowing very little about jiu-jitsu, could bring those elements to a jiu-jitsu match then?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to be able to show like a single leg or show double legs or show even just the mechanics of practice, fucking 1 hour or 2 hours a week would greatly
It's
help.
crazy.
But I'm
Crazy
saying a
cool.
lot of people don't play wrestling, not just because like they're afraid of wrestling. It's like the framework isn't there for them. So they default grab the gi and pull down, or they sit and, just default it versus, oh, this person's got some college wrestling or whatever going, oh, guess I'm screwed. My coach didn't show me anything, I don't know why I ranted there, but basically it's like we have a whole sport that has where we can slap bump and we're both standing. This would be different if jiu-jitsu was like many gyms you've seen too, like start kneeling and seated,
Oh yeah, that's when I first started.
But
That's what we did
but I'm
because I
sa-
thought that's how you went, right?
But I'm saying if that was like the culture of our sport, like
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what we did and we didn't do any standing elements of it, then it doesn't really matter too much, or maybe it wouldn't have much of an effect. But every single jiu-jitsu match, slap bumps, and you're doing a wrestling match
Yeah.
right away.
It's really just submission
crazy.
wrestling. I know
Yeah.
when you first said jiu-jitsu is really just submission wrestling, that seems pretty obvious, but like it really clicked with me.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely hate the idea of just both people just start
Yep.
kneeling or on their butt. Like I get it for practice, like practicing those positions.
Yep.
But when I see a jiu-jitsu match and both people just do that at the beginning, I'm like, what am I watching right now?
Well,
Like,
the hard part is that both those people, from my experience, like they don't have like a higher level of wrestling right away, so they're defaulted to do it. Like you're supposed to standing, like where the hell am I gonna learn wrestling? My coach didn't show it to me.
Yeah.
But it's like there's an onus on people to do that. But it's just funny as like if I switch hats quick as a business owner, it's like Jordan and I have talked about this many times. Like people are heading to Theory to work with Jordan with wrestling.
That's cool.
But I'm saying like there should be a flag for every other place in the world to say like, why doesn't our place support like a wrestling program or structure? Especially if there's a lot of people want to compete. Reagan's a good one, right? Of coming in here and working, doing a lot of wrestling and seeing the value of that. Like if you want to compete and have success at it, like it's such a huge component of modern day no-gi jiu-jitsu. Like it's a huge necessity for it.
Can I hop on my soapbox?
Do it.
Sorry.
We're here for
Sometimes
the
I get
soapbox.
into it.
All right, so I brought 2 pages or 3 pages of paper here with kind of like the beginnings of my wrestling for jiu-jitsu playbook. And the next thing I wanted to get into is actually the snatch single. So we're talking about like highest ROI.
Yeah.
I would say the front headlock sprawl position for sure. That's number 1 in wrestling.
Okay.
I think it's also a great neutralizer against good wrestlers. I would say, though, I took a look at some ADCC 2022 data from the Grappling Conjecture, and you can see far and away the single leg is the most attempted takedown. Now, it also has the most failures, but if you guys take a look at the chart here, it was also attempted way more than anything else, maybe combined.
Here's like the data question, right?
Yeah.
Was it attempted the most because that's what people have been taught?
Right.
Or is it because it actually is like the best? Is it like what's the reasoning behind the attempts?
I think it's actually because it's the most natural and the simplest. A lot of times when I've had people come in here and they just try to start wrestling right away, they just try to grab each other's leg.
I swear, Aaron, you're like, it's right there. There's a single. Funny.
But also the single leg is one of the most successful and effective wrestling moves too. So especially the sweep single, which is I would put in more of like an intermediate advanced category. But I think the snatch single is great for jiu-jitsu specifically because stances are a lot higher. So you don't have guys in like low wrestling stances. And that's where you have things like the penetration step, which helps you get there. But I think for people who are really just beginning, the snatch single is amazing because the leg's right there. They're standing a lot taller, and you can just grab it. And a great example of that is Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to say Aaron.
We have a guy here at Theory, Aaron.
Aaron, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Who's done
Your shout out.
He's done maybe 4 wrestling classes, like not a ton, but he learned the snatch single his first day, and he had a competition here at Theory, like, was that a month ago?
Yeah.
Wow, that feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah, it's quick.
But he hits a snatch single right away because I've been telling him, dude, your snatch single is really good.
Yeah.
Takes the guy down and then subs him with what was it, Americana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Shoulder lock.
yeah, and the snatch single was beautiful, and it was so easy to hit because the guy's standing like almost completely up. The leg's right there. You just grab it, keep good head position.
You know, I just thought of something. Aaron's got so much sports-specific training. It's like, okay, so he does deliveries for packages. It's literally reaching out,
I
grabbing
heard it in
a
my
package.
brain
I'm
before
like,
you said that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Aaron is like, Aaron, you've been training for that moment all this time, like that many hours a week.
Every wrestler now is going to be a UPS
Yeah, become a FedEx delivery guy. Because he's literally reaching out, grabbing packages, and pulling them. He's like, there could not be better training besides wrestling for that.
Yeah,
amazing.
I think the snatch single though is also, know your audience. So the people I coach and teach are older. Some of them are even in their 30s, 40s, and even Steve. I believe Steve's in his 60s.
Close to it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Steve's awesome.
It's hard to tell with him.
Well, he's freaking amazing, and I hope to be like Steve when I
Same.
So the snatch single is low impact on the knees because you don't hit a knee at all.
That's a huge thing right there.
Yeah.
Like, so you actually just said something that was cool that I never thought about is the reason for the penetration stop.
Yep.
You said it's just to be able to get underneath your opponent.
It gives you a bit more explosiveness, and you can get underneath a low wrestling stance. But in jiu-jitsu, you don't really see low stances because of fear of getting choked or someone getting on your head. And also just like people don't really know how to have a wrestling stance.
Those matches you sent me of yours, that was something really interesting from when you were wrestling. I noticed, it was almost like everybody was on all fours. It was like literally the difference between being on all fours or not was if you put your hands out. It was like that low. And like, just never thought about that.
Yeah, so that's I recently wrote an article. I think I called it "Jiu-Jitsu Knee Care: Save the Penetration Step for Later."
That's cool.
And it's all about this idea. Like you don't really need the penetration step in jiu-jitsu unless you get to the highest levels, which I would say would be like ADCC, CJI, and they don't even do it a ton in ADCC.
Yeah, I would say, like, have you seen it much in those type of matches?
Just like a little bit, but still not much because the stances are higher. But we're starting to see a lot more wrestlers cross over to jiu-jitsu. So like my thesis is in the next 10 years, everyone's going to be wrestling in some capacity. Stances will probably be a little bit lower.
Okay.
And penetration step will probably be needed a bit more. But it's still like, even in the highest levels of wrestling, I've known some guys who've become All-Americans who never did penetration steps. Like they just hit snatch singles.
That is cool to know.
Underhook throw bys, and they are definitely an edge case.
Yeah.
Because in wrestling, like we're taught the penetration step from the very beginning.
Okay.
Whereas I tried to teach it here in theory, and it was the most unnatural and unintuitive movement for everybody. So I was like,
it was weird.
how can I make this easier and make wrestling more fun and give them a takedown that's easy to learn and teaches you the laws of physics of wrestling? So what I mean by that is, if I give you a snatch single and all you do is pull your opponent to you and grab their leg, that's super easy. So you're like, okay, now I know how to get to a leg. But the laws of physics of wrestling in almost every position is keep your head up, back straight, hips in, and always work to like control the leg. I think the snatch single really teaches that in the simplest way possible. And once you know how to do that on a snatch single, you'll know how to do that on a double leg, a high crotch, all sorts of positions, and even in scrambles. So I think it's just such a simple position, and you can really take down probably 95% of jiu-jitsu folks with just a snatch single, especially if you get good at it. Obviously, there are different finishes and things we work, but it's really the basics win matches. Single legs, double legs. The double leg was also the most attempted in ADCC. Double leg is one of the best takedowns in wrestling too. Jordan Burroughs, I mean, a lot of people have heard of him. Probably the best USA wrestler ever, is the king of double legs. And it's the most basic thing. So it's like, if you can get good at the basics, single leg, double leg, front headlock, snap downs, and then I do think it's important to have an attack to both sides. So that's where I also throw in like an ankle pick or a knee pick. Those are great too, because low impact on the knee, you're not doing a penetration step. They're really easy to learn. So I think you can even learn all of this stuff in one practice. So one practice for each.
Okay.
So it could be like one practice focused on just simple hand fighting. It could be one on front headlock sprawl position, snatch singles, doubles, ankle knee picks.
Does your curriculum then here at Theory work like that, where you essentially work through each one of those each week or so?
So what I've been doing is, and Matt, you've experienced this, is I've been focusing we'll focus on one thing for a week or two, and then I'll start adding more things in. But I'm a big proponent of recapping, reviewing, and building on what we've been doing.
That's been helpful.
Not hopping around from like hand fighting to stand-ups, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'd rather just do hand fighting for a week or two. And then from there we go to snatch single, because snatch single comes from a hand fight. Then we work snatch single finishes. Then we spar in the snatch single in that position. Then we start just from hand fighting, and then people are looking for the snatch single. So those sorts of things. And then once people have become proficient, because we're never masters, once you become proficient in those, then we'll move on to maybe like the double leg. And then you start to realize, oh, I can use hand fighting to get to the snatch single or the double leg. Or I can now use it, like now we're learning ankle knee picks 3 weeks later. Like, oh, now I can use hand fighting to get to this. If I miss the ankle pick, oh, now I can like scoot into a double leg. You know, it just all builds on itself. So that's kind of how the system that I'm making right now is designed, is just to keep it really simple for beginners, people who aren't really competing but just want to learn wrestling. Give them really easy takedowns that actually work on the highest level, and it is backed by data. I know there's a lot more than this that I've seen, but I thought the ADCC 2022 takedown totals chart was interesting.
Was the sweep single kind of... I know, because I thought you were utilizing that your first...
Yeah.
Kind of...
Sweep single, I actually moved to more like intermediate.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The reason I did that is because the movement is a little different than like the others.
It's a big level change, it feels like.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a good tool to have if you're starting to dabble in competitions.
So you feel like to work up towards that, or that would be like a skill tree build at that point. You'd want to like build towards some kind of skill like that. Like
That's a level 70 wrestling technique.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think for more intermediate people who want to compete, it's learning how to like get your opponent off balance with fakes, wrist snaps, Starting to learn some slick stuff like the sweep single, maybe throw bys, duck unders.
Yeah.
That throw by you taught has been awesome.
Yeah.
I've hit that so many times. It's pretty cool.
And you get the back right away.
Yeah. And it's a little risk. If I goof it up, it's just like, oh, well, maybe next time.
Exactly.
You know?
And and then I think for more advanced people who are competing at the highest levels, I think it is still a good tool to have the penetration step. Working on reattacks, so that's like if someone tries to get to my legs, I'm not just defending it, I'm using my defense to then get to their legs right away.
So you haven't needed to upgrade that per se in any of your competitions as of late for jiu-jitsu? No. Yeah, I figured that, but it's just like, yeah. I guess the guy in your advanced absolute division was just size-wise difficult,
yeah.
But yeah, I guess you probably haven't really taken it out of like first gear or second gear really too much.
No, I'm still first gear Luffy in jiu-jitsu
Wow,
competitions.
That's amazing.
Or gear first.
But that's pretty impressive to say that, because to say that you can utilize that kind of first gear mentality, I think that would give a lot of other current jiu-jitsu people hope to feel like I don't need 20 years of wrestling to be somewhat competent in a standing game, like to do something where it's like just this basic level will work very well for you.
Yeah.
Against,
if you just learn simple hand fighting, front headlock sprawl position, and just a snatch single, you would be better than like 60-70% of jiu-jitsu people. Mm-hmm. But then if you learn the double leg and then you get good at an ankle or knee pick, you're now better than like 90%. And that's all I recommend beginners learn. Like you could just have those skills and be pretty good. Mm-hmm. So everything else is just, bonus.
Yeah.
Cherry on top.
Yeah.
And it all depends on your goals.
I like it.
So those are the things that someone should focus on.
Yep.
And you touched on this a little bit, but I just want to give you the space to talk and maybe riff a little bit on this if you wanted. Is there any techniques people should avoid in jiu-jitsu wrestling that either maybe not worth the time or actually are actually bad ideas as far as usability, injuries?
Only one really comes to mind. There are variations of this that are fine, but the fireman's carry. A lot of times, if you shoot a normal fireman's carry similar to like a high crotch, you'll end up in a position where a guy has your arm or both arms isolated, so you're in a crucifix.
Yeah.
This has happened to me when I've shot a good fireman's on someone who was like decent, and I was in a crucifix, and I was like, well, I'm not going to shoot that again. Now, there are variations of the fireman's where you could shoot it like a sweep single, but you have their forearm where you'd be completely fine. That works well. But I think your standard fireman's carry should probably be avoided so you don't get put in a crucifix. And
have you ever just put yourself in a crucifix?
I've ended up there accidentally against someone who didn't even know what they were doing.
Oh,
it's just like the position,
Yeah.
Man.
And maybe my fireman's carry also just sucks, but I used to take a lot of people down with it, so I think it's decent.
It's probably good.
So I would say fireman's carry, and then I would also say like this is of any sport, but you see all the like big highlights. Like I even have people here at Theory who are DMing me asking to see like the Islam Makhachev single leg he did to Poirier.
Visualize that.
Did he end up doing like a swoopy thing with
Yeah,
that?
it was a swoopy thing.
Oh,
Okay.
I getcha. Yeah, I remember that one. It was like the foot coming down and then going up.
I'm like really asking to learn that, and I think it's cool to see like how excited people are to learn that stuff, but I'm like, let's just focus on these like very basic beginner things.
Yeah.
Because while it might not be like the sexiest stuff, this is the stuff that you'll build on, you'll win matches with, and then once you get confident and proficient, we'll have some fun. We'll teach you that. Now, I do like to throw in some like semi-fun stuff every now and then, and I think there's fun ways to teach the beginner techniques.
Honestly, I think the basics are fun.
Yeah.
Like when we do those, I really enjoy it. I enjoy when we just even do the hand fighting.
Yeah.
I really like that. Another plug too for the way you run wrestling class that I really appreciate is we don't always like nobody faults you if you don't want to get thrown anymore. So like some days we'll be doing lots of reps and like I got some janky joints just from past injuries and things like that and not getting any younger. And like once I've posted out on my elbow for the 100th time that session, I'm just like, my elbow's got nothing left. Like if I keep doing this, I won't be able to train for like 3 or 4 days. So, and that's never a bad thing, right? Like the vibe of the class never like faults you for that and whatnot.
Yep.
So I guess if anybody's listening, and if you do have a wrestling program, if it doesn't have that, that's probably not a healthy program.
Yep.
But I just wanted to share. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I really like how it's never like, like nobody ever gives anybody crap for it. And it's just like, in fact, sometimes you'll even say like, don't do the finish. Just do this first part and finish the third one that you've collected.
But I think that's the switch with Jordan, seeing that. Probably by default, a little bit. You probably would have been like the same intensity mentality for like a high school or
I guess in college,
do
do you finish every single thing when you're practicing?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Okay.
No, sometimes if we're just starting, like they'll let us warm up on our own, and it's like I'm just doing the movements nice and light, getting warm. I won't finish. But once we get into like intense drilling, we're usually finishing stuff.
But just like what we talked about with like how many adult wrestling programs you see. But it has to have that culture shift where it's like it has allowances for people to go, I've done this 9 or 10 times now, like I'm going to go a little bit slower with it, and to be okay with it, but still have room for people who want to, keep up the pace and keep going and to allow that to happen.
There's two things there too. There's goals. So the people in here, I would say a majority are just hobbyists, like not really looking to compete. They just want to learn, and it could be for self-defense, whatever it is.
For fun.
Their goals aren't to be a national champ wrestler.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
So I'm just trying to, my goal is to just help you learn these techniques in a safe way, get you technically good. So I do come around and like, I can't help myself, but if I see something done badly, I'm like, hey, like fix this.
Well,
and once it's
that's what you're doing though.
Yeah.
That's you're teaching, right?
Once it's like probably 80% of the way there, if I've just really been on you, I'm like, all right, I'm just not going to hound you the rest of today. Like, let's just move on.
Take time for the programming to kind of seep in.
It doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is incentives. So like, I'm not incentivized to be on you like that. Like I want to eventually have this be a really good, chill wrestling program where people can come in. I can say one or two things. You guys can kind of just spar there, like the hand fighting, where I think it was you and Ben.
Yeah,
you guys are just hand fighting for 10 to 15 minutes.
I enjoyed
exploring.
I really needed that. That was like huge impact on feeling comfortable with it.
Right, and just really getting everyone familiar with the terms and how to do things, because then we can just play more, spar more. Through that experimentation, you start to find new things and have new questions. I answer those questions, and then it's just a great feedback loop where you just keep getting better because you're figuring out things yourself.
Well, then I'm sure there's some people who also are very gung-ho to use it for competition.
Yes, yep.
So I'm sure in those cases too, then you're turning the heat up a little bit, where like now you're expecting more, you're pushing them a little bit more.
Yeah, an example of that's like Reagan was getting ready for Subspectrum and a competition in Iowa, and we met here on a Sunday and just did like another hour of wrestling, and we didn't go super hard, but we went through some like techniques she was interested in learning that could be of use.
Yep.
And then we did drills where we picked up the pace a little bit more. So yeah, we're small enough here at Theory where I can be a little more individualized. But even if I had a bigger class, I would still try to be definitely lean on the chill side because we have older people. So if you're hurt, like, hey, just sit on the side and watch, just absorb it. I'm not going to be pushing you like that. But if I know you want to compete, I might have you at the end do more drills or stance in motion with me. Yep. And I'm also a big proponent of, I like to be involved. So I don't like to just coach all the time. I like to also jump in and wrestle with people, because if I can do it, they're like, oh, he can do it. Like I can,
Not bad.
It's kind of, for some people, it might be motivating and a little inspiring. I know for me, when I saw coaches jumping in, like my head coach Ayers, when I was at Princeton, he was 40 years old, still tossing me on my head.
That's
like,
awesome.
This dude is amazing. Like I thought that was so cool, and it's like one of the only sports where you could get your butt whooped by your coach.
Yeah, that's weird.
Plus, you give good feedback then too,
Yeah.
right? Because you're feeling something. It's hard to explain a feeling.
Exactly.
Like, that hand is too heavy. That one is not. Or, hey, you're too far forward. Like, things that you might be able to see, but you can really feel when you're, like, locked in or, engaged in the activity.
Yeah. But, yeah, I would say at the end of the day, it's definitely a cultural thing, too. I think when you're teaching wrestling for jiu-jitsu, if your room is mostly hobbyists, like, you should lean on the more conservative, chill side and not go too hard, but definitely still throw it in there every now and then, because those people are also still really grateful to get an awesome workout and really feel what a wrestling workout is at its highest level. So, I think it's just listening to your people and not just saying, like, go be tough.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so do a little recap here. I want to make sure we didn't miss anything that you wanted to cover.
Yep.
So, okay, we talked about why wrestling's super important. We've talked about some of the moves that are really high ROI and worth learning, and how there's actually kind of a graduated spectrum when it comes to like how far do you want to take this, right? What are your goals, like you were saying?
Yep.
What are your incentives? And we also talked about some things that probably aren't worth learning, some things to keep in mind. I guess before we dive into some of the things that you've made to help people learn wrestling, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think that really covers it. I would say highest ROI move is definitely front headlock sprawl position.
Okay. It's a fun one too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's so many options from there. And then I would say snatch single is an easy way for people to get started and really learn the different, I'm calling them the laws of physics of wrestling. But no, you can learn a lot from that position, and it's easy to get into and practice. So
I like it. Okay, so what have you built?
Yeah, so I have a website, jordanlaster.com, and for a while, I didn't know what I wanted my focus to be. Sometimes I was like, when it first started, it was all like Bitcoin stuff because I was deep down that rabbit hole. Then it turned into like health stuff. Now what it is, I think my tagline is here to help you improve your no-gi wrestling on and off the mat, or no-gi jiu-jitsu on and off the mat.
Cool.
So that actually is on the mat. That's going to be like this wrestling playbook I'm trying to write out and system I'm trying to create. And then off the mat would
Hold
be
on.
like...
We need to change some words there. You are creating, right?
Correct.
You're not trying it, because I'm literally looking at the beginning of this. You are creating this.
The system I am creating. And then off the mat would be health stuff. So it could be like I have tallow balm I sell here at Theory. I'm not selling this online or anything. It's just a local thing. But I found that's helped my skin a lot. I don't get any skin funk or anything. And my skin's always a lot more hydrated. And I'm not like walking around with cracked skin. And that's when you're going to start getting stuff, you know.
That's a good point. I never thought about
that. I've talked to some friends about like filtered water, good lighting at your home so you can sleep better, because sleep's like the most important thing we athletes need, you know. I'm still working on that. That's definitely my biggest issue, but it's gotten a lot better.
Nice.
So just things I found that have helped me, I'm sharing on my website. I have it on a page, jordanlaster.com/fuel.
Nice.
Fuel for the journey.
I like it.
The newsletter is called The Laster Frontier.
You cover brands of things that you like too, that have worked well for you.
Brands of things. So yeah, it's all on the page there. And my ultimate goal is just to raise the bottom line of wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Right now it's pretty crappy. And if everyone can be good at like one or two takedowns, like that's a massive win for the sport. So
that's cool. I like that. Should we rename the snatch signal like the Laster single or something? Because then you'll know how far it's like penetrating out into the market, you know?
Laster single.
The
last
single. It looks like a
you'll
snatch
ever need.
single. Oh no, that's very different. You actually grab with this finger pointing forward.
The Laster tracking ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the wrestling community would hate me if I did that.
I know. Okay. No, that's cool. And so you've also made some instructionals.
Oh, yes. I've made some instructionals. Those are also on my website on the courses page.
Okay. They're very affordable.
The first one, well, they're all free except for the last one. The first one
That's
is just...
incredibly affordable. He'll give you your money back if you don't like it.
He'll give you money.
Yeah.
You just have to give me your email.
Yeah.
That's about it. The first one is just wrestling fundamentals.
Okay.
So I made that very early on, and I even teach like the penetration step and stuff in there. I think it's good to know what it is, but you might just watch that as like a quick overview of like all the fundamental positions of wrestling. The second one was on the sweep single. So after my first comp, I was like, the sweep single was money.
Yeah,
I
you hit on everybody.
Everybody,
Yeah.
even all the big guys.
Jordan ran the train on his division here with this sweep single.
My first two matches were two guys who were 220 plus pounds, and I just swept singled them multiple times. So that's all on like everything on the sweep single: how to do it, how to enter it, how to finish it, and if someone stops it, how to still get a takedown. So
Cool.
Would you say that's super useful if you're looking to compete in like absolute divisions then?
yes, the sweep single.
Beyond just like the snatch single?
Yeah, I think snatch single is really hard against bigger guys.
Yeah.
Snatch single is really good for guys your weight.
Okay.
Because legs are heavy. But when you hit a sweep single, a lot of times a bigger guy might fall down and you're already out to the side. So now you can kind of just climb up to the back. Or you're in a better position on the leg to where you could still lift it. So sweep single has been money. I definitely still put that more in the intermediate category.
Yeah.
But if you catch on to wrestling beginner stuff pretty quick, you go ahead and learn it. So that's like an hour course, I think. Or maybe it's 45 minutes. I don't know.
He was taking on this brown belt in jiu-jitsu too. Was
What? When? What?
No.
Oh, right there. Oh, and they're in the video.
He was throwing me around.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then the last one I just made, so on my YouTube channel, I was getting a ton of comments like, because I had a video that said low risk takedowns to like avoid hitting your knee, or low risk takedowns without hitting your knee.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. And it's got like 20,000 plus views now.
Whoa.
And all the comments were like, dude, I'm 35. My knees suck. Thank you so much. Like, now I have takedowns to do without hitting my knee. One guy said, I tried the penetration step a lot when I was younger, and my toe, I have like chronic toe pain now. And I've actually had toe pain from the penetration step before.
Just because the bending of the foot over and
Yeah.
over? Okay.
So just comments like that. So I was like, we need an instructional for guys who don't want to hit their knees. And I have seen, after I made this one, I've seen some other people have done it too, so they probably got similar comments. But yeah, I made it. It's an hour long. It's all takedowns without hitting your knees. And I even threw like some foot sweeps and a little judo stuff in there too that I've been messing with.
Cool.
Because I think that's a cool thing to add to the game. But I also threw in competition clips of me doing the different techniques from my wrestling days. And hopefully as I compete more in jiu-jitsu, I can capture more of that and update the course too.
And that's the one that costs something?
That one is, I think I moved it to $14.
Oh,
Yeah, $14.
my goodness. You're
So
breaking
it's
the bank on
super
people
affordable.
here.
Right now, I'm just trying to get people to look at my stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to get feedback and just see if it's valuable, if I can structure it.
And that's $14
right
just
away.
like one time?
Yeah, just one time.
That's awesome.
So just trying to get people to see my stuff and build a brand and get my name out there.
I love it. I love it. Levi, you got anything?
No, I was fascinating listening to it the whole time.
All right. Well, with that, is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, I think that's about it.
I was thinking about doing like maybe a part 3, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, even though it's like not the field is not big, but I think especially now maybe we should do it after CJI of wrestlers getting into jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of where I broached the subject already.
That'd be cool.
Where it was like how many of those college wrestlers are experimenting with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because now it's the opposite. Now you're dealing with some funky leg entanglements and guards and just weird things. As a wrestler, you're not triangles. Like you're not accustomed to doing so. Like as a wrestler entering the field, what should be my biggest ROI as far as negating a jiu-jitsu player's game?
I definitely have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends who are wrestlers who are getting into jiu-jitsu, and they've actually started asking me these questions. So
I'm saying I think it's going to be a big boost after CJI because there's a lot of high-level wrestlers going into it.
I also think we could cover CJI a little bit real quick. We're going to see everything we talked about in this pod play out at CJI because we have Jason Nolf, who is the Olympic alternate right now.
Oh.
And he's in CJI.
I guess $1 million is a really alluring thing.
Yeah. You know? And he is in the under 80 kilogram division.
Okay.
And then we have Greg Kirkfleet, who is a 4-time All-American, 1-time national champ, who is in the over 80.
Oh, boy.
And he is definitely going to be the best wrestler there. Nicky Rod's probably the second best, and I think he destroys Nicky Rod. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see some really interesting results here. Nolf is training with Isaac Michel right now, so he's probably working like leg lock escapes and stuff, but you could see those guys win their brackets.
That'd be cool.
Like, I would not be surprised. So,
Well, it's like, wow, again, I remember someone just put the text out of it, but like the points as judges, so it's not like just like
it's a
sub
10-8 style,
yeah.
right?
So I mean,
10-8 rounds.
good aggression with wrestling. It's like,
I mean,
yeah.
if you see Nolf beat the Rutolo brothers, I mean, there's going to be massive demand for wrestling.
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
And yeah, I think Kirkfleet he's also, not only is he a good wrestler, he might be the biggest guy in the division.
Really?
I think. From when I've seen him, he looks massive. So
Dang.
there could be some guys I'm not thinking about who are also in there, but being the best wrestler and the biggest guy, I really don't know who's going to beat him. And I think
That's
bigger guys
cool.
don't do leg lock stuff as much.
not as dexterous,
So
for sure.
I could see him winning the whole thing pretty easily.
And the fact that, like, if you think about other really big guys that probably, some of them are over at ADCC, right?
Yep.
Like Gordon and whatnot.
Yeah, Felipe Pena and things like that. But like Gordon, Gordon could match up there with like the leg entanglement game
Right.
and the back control game and things like that. So I think that's where he pulls himself out of the wrestling elements of it and, gets in those positions. But there's not a lot of bigger dudes that have that level of technicality when it comes to leg entanglements and things like that. It's still probably the same, half guards and mounts and things like that and back control. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for CJI. I think we're going to see we're going to see the need for wrestling at the highest stage, and the two guys who are there, I think, are really going to do really well. Nolf is going to be more in trouble because of the leg locks, and he's got smaller guys who are good at that stuff.
Yeah.
But Kirk Vliet is a monster, so I'm excited to see what we talked about here play out on the largest stage.
That'll be cool.
And I can't wait to see the grappling conjectures analysis. I'm sure he's going to do one.
Oh,
if he doesn't,
yeah.
maybe I will.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Good point.
Because we'll get to see how wrestling has evolved in the sport and improved. So
I like it. All right. Well, there we go. That's Jordan Laster for you. Thank you so much for hopping on the pod. Have a good day.
See you guys.
Bye.
Got no ass.